Most people wake up every morning and unknowingly begin to rehearse the same thoughts they did yesterday. Without realizing it, their mind jumps into patterns worrying about the day ahead, replaying a painful memory, forecasting failure before anything even begins. This has become so familiar, so automatic, that they no longer notice it's happening. They assume it's just the way life is. But what they're really doing is reliving the past, not creating a future. A mind caught in this cycle, always thinking, always judging, always analyzing, is not free. It's noisy, and that noise is what keeps them from true power. You see, the mind isn't supposed to be in chaos all the time. But because of the stress we carry, the emotions we've memorized, the identities we're attached to, the mind becomes like a cluttered room, filled with voices that are not our own, filled with doubt, fear, guilt, shame, and most of us are living in that room every single day, never stepping outside of it. We think we're in control, but really we're being controlled by the thoughts we haven't chosen. And it's not just the thoughts themselves. It's the emotions tied to them. You think of something that upset you a week ago, and your body immediately feels the same stress. That's not the present moment. That's the past, living in your body, being reactivated by your mind. That's how people stay stuck. They don't just think the same thoughts, they feel the same emotions. And the body doesn't know the difference between an actual experience and one that's being recalled. So, day after day, without any change in awareness, people stay chemically locked into the past. And they wonder why their life looks the same. Now think about this. If the same thoughts lead to the same choices, and those choices lead to the same behaviors, which produce the same experiences that trigger the same feelings, then those feelings drive the same thoughts again. That's a loop. That's how your mind becomes your prison. It's how we end up being addicted to our own suffering, not because we want to be in pain, but because it's familiar. It's known, and the known, even if painful, feels safer than the unknown. That's how the noisy mind protects its territory. So what happens when you finally realize that the noise isn't that those thoughts running on repeat aren't your truth, but just patterns? Something begins to shift. You stop identifying with every voice in your head. You stop believing every fearful projection. And in that awareness, something miraculous happens. You create space. That space is where power lives. Because in silence there is clarity, in clarity there is choice, and in choice there is freedom. You begin to separate from the programming, from the past version of yourself. And that's when the real change begins, not when you try to force the world to change, but when you shift your internal state. But let's be honest, getting to that place isn't comfortable. The mind doesn't want to be quiet. It will resist. It will try to distract you, make you reach for your phone, make you check your problems again, just to stay busy. Because silence is unfamiliar, and what's unfamiliar feels unsafe to the conditioned mind. But if you're willing to sit with it, to breathe through the discomfort, to observe without judging, you begin to disarm the noise. You show the body that it can relax. You tell the nervous system that it's safe now. And when the mind quiets down even just a little, you begin to feel the difference. You start noticing what you were missing before. The beauty in stillness, the energy in the moment, the possibility in the unknown. You're no longer spinning in survival, you're beginning to live. That's when you start asking, if I'm not these thoughts, then who am I? And that's a powerful question, because it means you're waking up. You can't create a new future with the same mind that created the past. So if you want transformation, you must first be willing to observe the noise and not react to it, to sit in the stillness and allow the unknown to become familiar. That's where the journey begins, not in changing the outside world, but in mastering the space between your thoughts. A quiet mind is not a passive mind. It's a focused one, an intentional one, a powerful one. Most people think silence is empty, but it's not. Silence is full of intelligence, full of energy, full of possibility, and yet it's one of the most uncomfortable things for the mind to experience. The moment we sit down and close our eyes, the thoughts begin to race. The to-do list shows up, the memory from yesterday, the worry about tomorrow. All of it comes flooding in. Why? Because the mind has been trained to stay busy, to keep moving, to never stop. It's addicted to stimulation. And that addiction keeps you from ever truly knowing who you are without all the noise. You see, we've been taught that thinking more means we're being productive. That the louder the mind, the more engaged we are. But that's just survival thinking. That's the brain trying to stay in control by anticipating, managing, preparing for what might go wrong. And as long as that part of the brain is dominating, you can't access real power. Because real power doesn't live in overthinking. It lives in stillness. The moment you start to train your mind to be quiet, to be present, to be aware without reacting, you begin to step into a completely different state of being. When you sit down and begin to breathe, really breathe not just to survive, but to signal safety to the body, you start to shift your chemistry. You move out of fight or flight, you move out of stress, you move out of survival, and when you do that, the mind starts to settle. The thoughts lose their charge, you begin to separate from them instead of being pulled by them. And in that gap, that moment of awareness, you have a choice. To keep feeding the old emotional loops or to stay anchored in the present. That's the beginning of true freedom, and listen, it's not about having no thoughts at all. That's a myth. Thoughts will come. The goal isn't to eliminate them. It's to stop reacting to them, to see them, let them pass, and return your attention to the breath, to the body, to the moment. Over time, that practice builds mental discipline. It's not flashy, it's not dramatic, but it's powerful. Because when the mind learns to obey the present moment instead of chasing after every distraction, you gain control. You're no longer a victim of the old programming, you're rewriting it. That's where real transformation happens, not when you try to fix everything outside of you, but when you change your internal response to it. And the only way you can do that is through conscious stillness. When you quiet the mind, you can hear what your body has been trying to tell you for years. You become aware of the tension you've been holding, the emotions you've buried, the pain you've normalized. And instead of suppressing it or numbing it, you begin to feel it fully without judgment. That's healing. That's integration. That's becoming whole again. Most people don't realize how much energy is trapped in their own reactivity. Every time you overthink, every time you overanalyze, every time you replay that argument, your body is burning energy trying to survive a threat that isn't even real anymore. But when you calm the mind, the body follows. It begins to regenerate. It begins to restore. Your immune system strengthens. Your heart rate stabilizes. Your nervous system rebalances. You're not just thinking differently. You're being differently. And from that state, you can finally access the intelligence that exists beyond the analytical mind. That's when inspiration strikes. That's when intuition becomes clear. That's when you receive guidance that doesn't come from logic, but from knowing. And the more you practice entering that space, the more natural it becomes. Silence stops feeling foreign. Stillness stops feeling uncomfortable. You start to crave it. You start to value it more than the endless scroll, more than the noisy drama of the external world. Because now you've felt the difference, you've experienced what it's like to be in control of your inner world, and nothing outside of you can compete with that. This is why the greatest breakthroughs don't happen in the middle of chaos, they happen in moments of quiet. That's when you become the observer instead of the reactor. That's when you step out of the story and into awareness. And that awareness is where your power lives. You're no longer bound by who you were 5 minutes ago. You're free to choose who you want to be right now. That's the moment when transformation begins, not in force, not in struggle, but in the calm, steady presence of a quiet mind. A quiet mind is the doorway to your highest potential. Most people live their entire lives reacting. Reacting to their circumstances, reacting to people, reacting to thoughts and emotions they don't even understand. They think they're making choices, but what they're really doing is repeating unconscious habits. The moment something doesn't go as expected, they get triggered, and that trigger pulls them into a familiar emotional state. Maybe it's frustration, maybe it's guilt, maybe it's fear. Whatever it is, it happens so quickly that they don't even realize they're no longer in control. The environment controls their mind, the past controls their behavior, and their future. It just becomes a continuation of the same story. But when you quiet the mind, something shifts. You create the space to observe instead of automatically react. In that space, that pause, that's where your freedom lies. Because the difference between someone who is surviving and someone who is creating is simple. One reacts to life, the other responds with intention. One is pulled by emotion, the other moves with awareness. And that shift only happens when you start training your mind to become still enough to notice the pattern asterisk before asterisk it takes over. Think about how often you've had an emotional reaction and later said, "I didn't mean to say that," or "I don't know why I did that." That's because in that moment, the subconscious program was running the show. It wasn't the present version of you making that choice. It was the old version, the one that's conditioned to survive, to protect, to defend. And every time you react that way, you reinforce the identity of that old self. You tell your brain and body, "This is who I am." And if you keep firing the same emotional responses, your biology, your personality, and your personal reality all stay exactly the same. So, how do you break the cycle? You become aware of the moment when the emotion arises, and instead of reacting, you pause. You breathe, you become present. That's not weakness, that's mastery. Because to override a conditioned response takes energy. It takes intention. It takes the willingness to sit in the discomfort without reaching for the familiar reaction. And when you do that, when you choose not to react, you reclaim your energy. You signal to your brain and body, "We're not living in the past anymore." You teach your nervous system that it's safe to respond differently. And once you stop reacting, you can start creating. That's where intention comes in. Now, instead of repeating old emotional states, you begin to rehearse new ones. You begin to ask, "Who do I want to be in this moment?" Not who were you yesterday, not who your past says you are, but who you're becoming. And when that intention is clear and when your mind and body are aligned with that vision, you begin to respond to life in a completely different way. Let's say someone criticizes you. The old version of you might react with defensiveness or withdrawal. But the quiet mind, the trained mind, doesn't take it personally, it doesn't react, it observes, it pauses, and it chooses. Maybe it responds with compassion. Maybe it doesn't respond at all. Either way, it's not losing energy. It's not giving power away. It's in control, and here's the thing. When you start living from intention instead of reaction, the external world doesn't have as much influence over you. You stop needing things outside of you to be a certain way for you to feel okay. That's emotional freedom. And that's what makes you powerful, not because you dominate or control others, but because you've mastered yourself. You know how to maintain your internal state no matter what's happening around you. And when you can do that consistently, you become the creator of your life, not the echo of your past. Now imagine what's possible when you string together a day of intentional responses, then 2 days, then a week. Your body starts trusting you, your mind starts working for you, you start noticing synchronicities. Opportunities show up that align with the version of you you've been rehearsing. And none of it is coming from force. It's coming from coherence, because when you're no longer in survival, your energy becomes magnetic. You draw in what matches your state of being. That's when the future stops being a hope and starts becoming a reality. And it all starts with the decision to stop reacting and start responding. That moment where you interrupt the old pattern and say, "Not this time. This time I choose differently." That's where the shift happens. That's where the change begins. That's when you stop being the memory of your past and start becoming the vision of your future. And in that choice, you become free when the mind is no longer racing. When you've trained yourself to sit in stillness, something extraordinary begins to happen. You begin to feel not just emotionally, but energetically. You start to notice the space around you. You start to sense the quiet intelligence that lives in that space. And instead of feeling separate from life, you start to feel connected to it. It's in that stillness that you begin to tune into the field, the same field that governs all creation. The same field that responds not to what you say you want, but to who you are being. Most people try to manifest from a state of lack. They want a new reality, but they're thinking the same thoughts, feeling the same emotions, and carrying the same energy as their past. And the universe doesn't respond to what you want, it responds to your electromagnetic signature. It responds to the signal you're broadcasting. So if your mind is chaotic, filled with doubt, fear, impatience, or frustration, that's the vibration you're sending out. And that's exactly what gets reflected back to you. Not because life is punishing you, but because life is matching you. When the mind becomes quiet, the heart begins to open. And when your brain and heart are in harmony, they create coherence. That's when your energy becomes ordered, clear, and powerful. You're no longer trying to create from the level of thought. You're creating from the level of being. And that's the difference. That's where the shift happens. That's when you stop forcing outcomes and start attracting them. Not from effort, but from alignment. Not from trying to control, but from trusting the flow. You see, you can't fake coherence. You can't fool the field. You might say all the right affirmations, visualize every morning, speak about what you want. But if underneath it all, your body is still living in survival, still emotionally addicted to the past, still feeling unworthy or fearful, then that's the signal you're actually sending out. And that signal is incoherent. It's fragmented, it's full of contradiction. That's why nothing changes, that's why the same patterns repeat. The mind says one thing, but the body believes another. But when you quiet the mind long enough, when you stop rehearsing the old story and you begin to connect with the energy of your future not as an idea, but as a feeling, then everything begins to shift, because now you're teaching your body emotionally what it feels like to already be that version of you. You're no longer waiting for the external to give you permission to feel abundance or love or freedom. You're feeling it first, and that's what changes your energy. That's what makes the future familiar instead of foreign. That's what draws it to you. The universe doesn't respond to desperation. It responds to authenticity. It responds to clarity. When your inner world is in order, the outer world has no choice but to reflect that order back to you. You become the cause, not the effect. You stop reacting to life, and life starts responding to you. That's the law. That's how this works. But you can't get there through force. You can't think your way into alignment. You have to feel it. You have to become it. And that requires stillness. That requires presence. That requires stepping into the unknown and surrendering the need to control the outcome. And that's uncomfortable for the analytical mind, because it doesn't trust what it can't predict. But the moment you surrender, the moment you let go of how and when, you create space for something greater to step in. And that's when synchronicities happen. That's when opportunities show up that you couldn't have planned. That's when life starts working with you, not against you. You'll know it's working when you no longer care if it happens. Not because you've given up, but because you're so connected to the energy of your future that you're no longer trying to get it. You're living it. You're embodying it, and in that state, the waiting ends, because the future is no longer something out there. It's already in here. You're no longer separate from it. You're aligned with it, and that alignment is magnetic. When you become the energy of your future before it arrives, you collapse the timeline between who you've been and who you're becoming. And you're no longer trying to make something happen, you're allowing it, because your frequency already matches the outcome. And when your energy is greater than your circumstances, that's when the impossible becomes inevitable. A quiet mind isn't weak. It's the foundation of true power.